welcome back to Lisa at the Edge. It's been a while. I've been a little bit quiet. I've been busy. And two other people that have been extremely busy with me is my teammates, Mike and Michael. And that's who we've got here today. And I'm super excited to have them on. Hello, how are you guys?
Good, how are you?
Good, thank you. I'm looking forward to getting stuck back into the podcast episodes. I really enjoy them. And it's good to have you both on an episode because we've not done one yet. I've done one with Gianth and Janica.
Nope.
We covered why Dell for Azure Stack Hub. And then obviously Kenny's been on, but we've not had you guys on. So I'm excited to have you guys on, and let's introduce you to the people. So Mike Derrberry, please introduce yourself.
Sure. So Mike Derrberry, been at Dell now about 3 years, which includes a small stint at VMware. Prior to that, I was at Microsoft for 20 years, working everything from Internet Information Server 1.0, which I'm dating myself, up to, the early days of like Azure, both from a PaaS and a SaaS side of things, just the early development, trying to get it to market. So been around the block for a few years.
Nice. Michael Wells, please introduce yourself.
Michael Wells, I've been with Dell for, it'll be 6 years next month. Before that, I was on the customer side. I spent over 7 years as a SQL Server DBA. Before that, I was a .NET application architect, a .NET developer, desktop support. It's been close to 20 years now in IT.
We'll need to get you both back on the podcast for Tell Me How You Got Into Tech episode, because I do enjoy those. So for any new listeners, we are all part of a team at Dell. It's been a few months now that we've had our new name. We are the Global Engineering Outreach Specialist Team, also known as GEOS, to shorten it down. We're all focused on Azure Stack. So myself and Kenny look after EMEA. Gianth and Janica take care of APJ. And the Mike's here, Mike's times two, as I like to call them, take care of our America's customers and opportunities. But we all sort of dip in and support each other, and we work quite closely together as a team. So that's why it's good to have them on the podcast. And what we're going to talk about today is why Dell for Azure Stack HCI. So going back to what I said earlier about having a little bit of a break from the podcast and being super busy, it's because, my inbox has been on fire since we launched Azure Stack HCI. We've been enabling and training our own sales teams, our pre-sales teams, our partners. We've had customer engagements, partner engagements. It's a hot topic. Have you guys found that to be the same since we launched in February?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. It's been like drinking from a faucet on wide open.
Yeah.
Which is good, which is excellent.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it is good. It's great to see the enthusiasm coming both from our sales teams and our customers and our partners. So it's probably timely that we do this episode on why you should probably choose Dell if you are looking at Azure Stack HCI, right? And actually, so we did a bit of light prep prior to this episode recording. But one thing we probably didn't say that we should start off with is what is Azure Stack HCI? Because that would probably be a good idea. Because we do know that the Azure Stack portfolio has caused some confusion over the last.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Over the last couple of years or so, right? I think that would be fair to say. And Microsoft launched Azure Stack HCI, went GA in December of 2020. And then we at Dell launched our offering in February of 2021. So I'll give my pitch on what Azure Stack HCI is, and then you guys can jump in and share your sort of description of it. So the way I kind of tend to explain it is that Azure Stack HCI is a new operating system from Microsoft delivered as an Azure service. So you consume it and you pay for it via Azure, as you would any other Azure services. It is an operating system that is focused purely on being an operating system for an HCI, a hyper-converged infrastructure. It has tight integrations with Azure, being delivered as an Azure service, which means you can view your HCI platforms from the Azure portal, and then also you can enhance that platform with Azure services. And it's sort of the product that really truly delivers on that Microsoft hybrid cloud definition that they kicked off a number of years ago now. So I would say that's the very short way to describe it. Michael, anything to add?
Just a little bit more. The HCI is like you said, it's a purpose-built operating system. It's designed from the ground up to be hybrid with Azure. So it's once you build out the cluster, the first thing you're going to do is register that cluster against an Azure subscription, and it's immediately going to start reporting information into Azure. The consumption through that pay-as-you-go model of the per core per month billing for it, but it really is. It's a break from Windows Server, so you're not going to have all of the other stuff that you would normally find in Windows Server. So the intent is Windows Server remains the operating system that you can run anywhere, right? So it's still going to have all the features that you're used to, but HCI OS is a subset of those features. It's intended to run on bare metal. It's intended to be an HCI operating system, an HCI platform. It's going to include all of those components that are required for HCI. So your hypervisor, your software-defined storage, your software-defined networking, but it's not going to include things like Active Directory. It's not going to include things like file services. It's not going to include DHCP. That's not what it's there for. It is meant to be the best HCI platform, the best virtualization platform. And so that's really the goal of the operating system. So it is much smaller than Windows. It's going to be updated much more frequently than Windows is. So we're seeing enhancements made to the underlying technologies released at a more rapid pace with HCI OS than what we see in Windows Server. It's going to have a smaller attack surface, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike.
And just a quick add-on to that. Just from a targeting workload perspective, think of it more of a traditional virtualization platform. So it's being able to run those, legacy hypervisor workloads that you may have been running on Hyper-V traditionally, like legacy, but brought forth in a more modern way, right? So consuming that software-defined networking and storage alongside the hypervisor itself. Versus Hub, and I'll just kind of throw in Hub in here just to kind of paint the picture.
It's always good to do.
And where that you're actually consuming Azure services, so you're consuming, PaaS services and IaaS services on-prem through that Azure model. Like you're running the same type of Azure VMs and that kind of thing that you would do in the Azure public space. That happens on Hub behind your firewall. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a really good point. Azure Stack HCI allows you to, one, modernize your infrastructure on-prem, so move towards hyper-converged if you're not there already. And then it allows you to bring those workloads that for whatever reason you have not moved into Azure, if you are on an Azure journey, it allows you to bring them into a consistent view and management tool set, because you can view and manage them from the Azure portal, and you can view and manage them from Windows Admin Center that you might be used to. And it's this perfect blend of the virtualized world and the cloud native world, especially when you think about the Azure services, which are on their way to Azure Stack HCI. So for instance, Azure Kubernetes service on Azure Stack HCI. And Mike, I know that you've written a blog about that. You've done demos for us on that. Do you want to talk a little bit about AKS on Azure Stack HCI?
Sure. Yeah. So
Not
it's still in preview. Yeah. No, it's all good. Yeah, just being able to have the ability to run containers in an orchestrated way on Azure Stack HCI is a huge step in that whole modernization of the platform, right? You know, right now it's currently in preview from Microsoft. So Microsoft has made the preview bits available to deploy on your Azure Stack HCI infrastructure. And it is a fully managed ecosystem where it is managing those containers for you in and out of, for scale up, scale down, and that kind of thing. So it's going to be a great experience that you can run on that HCI infrastructure like you would do typically anywhere else, but be a full Azure Kubernetes experience itself, like you would get in public space.
That's what's really important to point out here. Like what I would like to really make clear is AKS, so Azure Kubernetes Service, has been a service on Azure for a while now, right? People have used this, they've loved it, and you're taking that exact Azure service and being able to run on-prem. That's super powerful. Super powerful.
It really is. So looking forward to it too, hitting GA soon.
Yes, imminently. Probably by the time we get this podcast out, it might be
maybe. Yeah, that would be good.
It should be really, really soon.
Microsoft, you listening?
Yeah.
Well, and then the tie-in with Arc-enabled Kubernetes really kind of puts the bow on it. So the idea of, okay, so if I'm in a large IT environment and I'm maintaining clusters in various locations, and I have to maintain, so I maintain HCI clusters all over the place, and on those clusters I'm running AKS and I'm managing applications on top of those. Being able to tie it all together with Arc-enabled Kubernetes to be able to manage those applications from a single portal, regardless of where the physical cluster lives, is really the next piece that pulls it all together.
Yeah, and like you said, Michael, this is a sort of fork in the road from Windows Server. It will update and improve at a much more rapid pace. So this is just a start, really, right? And it's already brought some new features. So we've got like stretch clustering, which is quite a big one that people I think have been after for a while. And it's not. So you get that with Azure Stack HCI OS. You don't get that with Windows Server. So that's sort of a differentiation there. And I think that's just that's the beginning, and there'll be more to come. And just quickly as well, we'll just cover off the fact that yes, it is consumed as an Azure service, and therefore you pay on a consumption basis. So you are charged at $10 per core per month, and therefore currently you have to be connected once every 30 days for that billing purpose. And I think the other thing, just to clarify, Windows Server hasn't gone away. From a Dell perspective, we have Windows Server HCI and we've got Azure Stack HCI. And we're still servicing and providing both solutions. There are still use cases for both. And the conversations become about what the customer has today, what they're looking to achieve in the future, and what is the best solution for them. So those are a few things we should probably clarify. Anything else?
Yeah, and just a note on that too, the 2019 side does allow you to be in a disconnected state. So you don't have to consume that connected to Azure Public.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else we should clarify before we sort of toot our own trumpets and talk about why Dell for Azure Stack HCI, apart from having us three as expertise, what more could you want?
What else do you need?
Clearly, I'm in a good mood today.
No, I think we covered it pretty well.
Yeah, I think that sets the scene well especially for what we're going to sort of dig into as well. So I think from there we've discussed and we've come up with sort of around about 5 main key areas as to what you might to consider when picking an OEM, and why we feel and are proud to be part of the team in Dell that's come up with our it's got a wonderfully rolls off the tongue name. Does anybody else want to take that?
You wouldn't happen to be referring to the OpenMange integration for Windows Admin Center, would you?
No, that is another one that we will come on to. But the very first one, so the Dell EMC integrated system solution. I know we're very specific.
Solution. It's integrated solution.
I do not want marketing to come down on me.
No.
The Dell EMC integrated solution for Azure Stack HCI. So, I mean, that is a product name that just rolls off your tongue. And here's Piper to say that she agrees. And she's out. So why we are super proud to be part of the team offering that solution. And I think, first of all, we should just toot our own horn a little bit, and we should just talk about some statistics. And those statistics are that we are #1 in server business, #1 in hyper-converged infrastructure. And I think, a lot of people will recognize that with Dell, VxRail, for instance. But we're actually also #1 in the Microsoft solution segment, which is crazy. And I don't think a lot of people will realize. Does anybody want to elaborate on some of those points?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if you look at just from the Microsoft solution side, right? At the end of the day, we've had a 30-year partnership with Microsoft, building joint engineered integrated solutions that go back many, many years, even back, in the early days of computers and PCs, right? So this partnership has evolved, and as the enterprise space has exploded in the last few years, Dell and Microsoft have gone beyond, the typical just OEM relationship. It is a true partnership.
Yeah.
I think that's huge. And when you look at the market today, we're talking over 77% of the market share goes to Dell for specifically Microsoft solutions. So I think it paints a really good picture on how we build those solutions together rather than Microsoft dictating what what a solution might look like, and then an OEM is up to them to go figure it out. We partner together to deliver that.
Yeah, I've definitely been. I mean, there was a reason why I chose to come and work at Dell on Azure Stack, and it was because of the strength of that partnership. But I've been really blown away to see the close engineering relationship we have. I think in the engineering space, we work really closely with Microsoft, and it's been awesome to see that firsthand since I joined. Michael, do you have anything to add to those statistics?
No, it just like you said, it's that close engineering relationship. The fact that we're collaborating on these things, we are working on co-engineering implementation, and the regular contact we have with the engineering side at Microsoft, constantly reporting in feedback and helping to make the product stronger, and then that goes all the way through into support as well. So the ability to do the electronic case exchange on the back end, to be able to hand off cases between the organizations, to ensure that it's his fault, right? So stop the finger pointing. No, you're not going to get told to hang up and call somebody else. We're gonna work with you, and whether you call Microsoft or whether you call Dell, the case is going to be escalated to the appropriate people without having you start all over again from scratch.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that sums it up well, and I think it's sometimes something that people they don't automatically think of when they think of Dell, because of our strong partnership with VMware, which is understandable. But partners for 30+ years, one of their largest partners, have been involved in every iteration of their sort of on-prem cloud from an OEM perspective. That close working relationship. We know ourselves, we work with the Microsoft Global Black Belts for Azure Stack on a daily, weekly basis. I think that tight partnership is super important. And then we can just add the cherries on top about the fact that they are based on, at the end of the day, PowerEdge, which is the #1 server, and the fact that we're #1 in the HCI space. But then I think actually that leads us on quite nicely to the next point. So one thing to make clear when it comes to Azure Stack HCI is OEMs had a choice, and they have a choice to go down the ready node and or the integrated system path. And Dell have chosen to go down that integrated system path. And there's a few reasons for that. I suppose I would say we've got our experience with vSAN and we have our experience with VxRail. We know that integrated systems with our lifecycle management, which we're about to come on to, is where we really add value. I think Dell really get that this product is with Azure, not instead of Azure or against Azure, it's that hybrid solution, and we want our customers' experience to be what we don't want it to be, night and day. So we don't want them, you know, in Azure, running and managing their services in Azure, and then running some services on Azure Stack HCI and having a very different experience. We want to support them in streamlining their operations and elevating them up the value chain. And, you know, a lot of that sounds like buzzwords, but it's really, I think, far more apparent when it comes to a system like Azure Stack HCI and a customer who's on that journey. Do you have, so unless I didn't clarify there, we've chosen to go down the integrated system route, right? That's what we've chosen to do as Dell.
Yeah, and I think it builds upon what we've delivered in other areas for integrated systems, right? So if you look at Hub is an integrated system by nature, and that's kind of the Microsoft vision as well as Dell's and other OEMs. But we know how to build those integrated solutions. We've got other solutions in our portfolio that are integrated solutions on HCI, like VxRail. So we know how to build that story and make it cohesive for our customers to deliver for their workloads, right, and their solutions. So I think that prior experience is really what we bring to bear, not just in the Microsoft space, but broader than that.
Yes, exactly. And sharing those learnings across these different products and sort of knowing what we're really good at and wanting to bring the best of that to all these solutions, including our Microsoft ones. Okay, so we've gone down the integrated system route. That's what we've gone all in on. We want this to be an enterprise class solution. We want to streamline and simplify operations. And we do this, a lot of this, with our lifecycle management integration with Windows Admin Center, which as a non-techie, I find, like, even when I watch the demos and stuff like that, I'm like, that is beautiful. Like, that's what that is when I see those, the demos and the view and our integration with Windows Admin Center. It's so nice, I would say, but that's not enough to sell it. So I'm going to ask Michael to kick us off and sort of talking a bit more in depth about what our lifecycle management integration provides. And that's the second long name, Omniswack.
So the key to our lifecycle management is the OpenMange integration for Windows Admin Center. Because if you think about it, Windows Admin Center is the management interface for Azure Stack HCI on-prem. Right, so that's how you're going to manage the hardware. It's how you're going to manage the operating system. You can deploy the HCI cluster that way. It's that is your primary management interface. And for anybody who's not already aware, Windows Admin Center has been out for a couple of years now. It was originally released as Project Honolulu, and has grown significantly since then. And the idea is it replaces MMC. So MMC, the Microsoft Management Console, was a local console you had to remote onto the server to get to, had all sorts of different snap-ins that you could utilize. But Microsoft has moved away from that model. They're not putting any new investment into MMC, and the new capabilities you're seeing are coming through Windows Admin Center. It's a web-based interface. So the idea is you can centrally manage a number of different systems that are in different areas. And the idea being I can do things like computer management and VM management and registry and storage and all of these other things I can do through a single console against any of a number of servers that I've configured against this. And then the framework also allows for extensions. So Microsoft adds extensions to add additional functionality, but then all third parties can also create extensions as well. And so we had initially launched our extension, so the OpenMange Integration 1.0, I think we released in 2019. That was the ability to pull in hardware and resource information directly into the Windows Admin Center console from the iDRACs directly without you having to leave the console. All right, so the extension within Windows Admin Center is actually talking to the iDRACs and pulling back that information for you, so you never have to leave your management tool. Last year in 2020, we introduced the 1.1 version, which added cluster-aware update capabilities. So you could actually do your updates of firmware, drivers, BIOS from our Azure Stack HCI update catalog, which is one of the other nice things about the integrated system, is the fact that you're not having to manage individual PowerEdge drivers. You are downloading a single update catalog from us that has all of the validated drivers and configurations. So you never have to worry about, is this version of the driver going to interfere with this version of the firmware or any of those. It's all handled for you. We're already pre-validating all of those packages. So the clusterware updating in 1.1. And now with our 2.0 version, which is specific to Azure Stack HCI, we now incorporate in operating system updates into that. So now I can run a compliance check. I can see if anything needs to be updated, and then I can remediate it immediately, or I can schedule it to remediate later. And it will go through, do the clusterware update. So it'll drain all of the roles from that node. It'll update that node, BIOS, firmware, drivers, and operating system, reboot the node, and move on to the next node in the cluster. And it does this by itself. So you don't have to handle any of that. It's taking care of all of it for you. And it's with a single reboot per node. So being able to update that cluster with a very small amount of actual keyboard time to do it, and you're not taking any services offline in the process.
In fact, on that point, shout out to Mike Lamia, by the way, who's a legend, also been on the podcast, but he works in technical marketing for Azure Stack, and he has created a white paper. And I actually love the process that Mike went through to do this, to make sure that it was accurate, the claims that we were making. So he went through this process manually, right? And he went through it a number of times until he got good at it. Yeah. And then he took the time. So he recorded things like how much he had to attend the process and the manual steps, etc. And one of the claims, which I find amazing, is that our integration and our lifecycle management resulted in 97% less attended time for infrastructure updates. And massive. That, I mean, it's like you put out that number and you're almost like, no, that's crazy. That's massive. So you want to know that it's backed up, but actually that is what it resulted in. And I just find that insane. I think there was a massive reduction in manual steps as well. And
I love how you called out the fact that he didn't just take his time from the first time through it. He got good at it and then measured the difference in the time. So it's not like the infomercials that you see on TV where the person can't slice a piece of bread and everything flies all over the place. No, he got good at it. He got it down to a realistic time and then measured the difference.
Yep.
So funny because me and my little brother just had this discussion today. So I had to drop him off the garage. His van's going to the garage, and we were talking about fuel efficiency and the claims that manufacturers make. We were talking about the fact that they lied about emissions, and then now they, and all this kind of stuff. And he basically said, he was like, I mean, I'm sure in the small print it says the claim is made like the van's in like an air wind tunnel, and like everything's just perfect for. Do you know what? And I said, and I actually thought to, and this paper came to mind because I was like, surely you have to be able to back those claims up. And I think the most amazing thing about Mike is that he literally will not put a claim out that he can't back up.
Substantiate.
It's amazing. So and that's what we want to deliver with this lifecycle management and these capabilities, is to literally hand back time to the teams who are managing these infrastructures, especially with something like Azure Stack HCI. Because like we said, yes, it's there to host all your virtual machines and your workloads that you're not refactoring, replatforming, moving to Azure. But it also enables you to bring that Azure model of governance and policy management and resource groups and tagging, etc., to your on-prem workloads, and you need time to start to look into that and take maximize on the benefits of enhancing that infrastructure with Azure services, right? So the more that we can hand back IT teams to do that, hand back time, as it were. We also talked earlier about having a time turner from Harry Potter. We won't go down that road.
But save that for another podcast.
Yeah, right. That's a whole nother podcast on its own.
like Dell marketing will see this and be like, this is absolutely brilliant, chat. We can use this. And then we'll start talking about how Dell is like a time turner. No. Too far, Lisa, too far. Okay. So did we also cover the fact that we can also do cluster aware updates and creation and management?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So I talked about the cluster aware updates, but the having the ability to using our plugin to quickly create a cluster too, that the automation for the creation of the cluster is important as well, because if you think about it, Azure Stack HCI has strict requirements for the cluster and the nodes being matched, and you don't want to introduce inconsistencies between the nodes. So our automation isn't just for day 2 operations, which we tend to focus on because that's the largest amount of time. Right? You're generally going to deploy once, and then from there it's maintaining. But we also help to streamline that deployment process by ensuring that all of the software drivers and firmware within the nodes themselves are all at a consistent level before we go through the cluster creation process to try and minimize any issues that could present during the cluster creation.
Awesome. Okay, so basically where we're at now is number 1 in every area that matters. Super strong partnership with Microsoft. Lifecycle management, which results in literally handing back your IT team's time to really embrace the Azure side of Azure Stack HCI. Love it. Let's go on next to talk a little bit about the configurations that we have, right, of our AX nodes. So actually, let's also describe what we mean when we say AX nodes, because they're really it's a term internal to Dell, and it's the nodes that we use to build our Microsoft solutions, right? So Azure Stack HCI and Hub. But let's talk a little bit about what that means to us and why they have a special name. Like, they're not just PowerEdge. They are AX nodes. Mike, throwing it over to you. Do you want to take that?
Sure. Yeah. So if we kind of peel back the onion, right? We have our underlying server line, which is based on PowerEdge servers. That's number 1 in the market. We've covered that. But what we've decided to do, like early on in the HCI trajectory, we had ready nodes that were based on our PowerEdge R740, R640, that kind of thing. But what we've done since then is we've introduced the line for AX nodes, which are targeting Microsoft workloads specifically. So it's really been designed and engineered to run those types of workloads versus an ad hoc approach or a la carte approach to building a server and the overall solution to it, right? So that's where the AX nodes really fits into the puzzle. Is it's an architected PowerEdge line that's been honed to those Microsoft services, and from there we still have the flexibility and broad scope of component list. So we still have a large BOM or bill of materials that we can build from to support whatever your workloads look like. Yes. So we can mix and match hardware level, RAM and CPUs to what you need. But it's and we'll kind of talk about this a little later in our support, but it helps drive us a consistent message throughout the lifecycle management, right? So we can ensure that component availability is there throughout the entire lifecycle, not just we ship it to you, a component gets discontinued by a OEM or another provider, and you can no longer get it. We want to make sure that we can still provide that throughout. One of the things too that we've really taken a strong position on is having multiple types of configurations, and we even support switchless configurations. So we typically support the top of rack switching default configs, but we also allow you to run a switchless configuration to the environment. And other OEMs can do this as well, but one thing that we've kind of gone above and beyond is to offer the availability not in just a 2-node switchless config, but also allow it in a 3 and 4-node switchless config. Beyond that, we really have to have those top of rack switches to really communicate between the nodes. But in those smaller node configurations where either cost or power is an issue or anything like that, where you may not need those switch configurations, we offer that up to 4 nodes.
Well, cost, power, maintenance, right? So if you've
Yeah.
got to maintain another set of switches, they're managed switches. You've got to maintain the operating system, the firmware on those switches. You've got to maintain the configuration on those switches. It's another layer of complexity. And if you're in a small configuration that's in a remote site that doesn't have IT staff there, then why introduce that complexity if it's not necessary?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And actually, whilst we've here, because we've mentioned a little bit about use cases, and maybe we should have done this at the start, but let's do it now. Let's talk about some of the use cases for Azure Stack HCI, because they are quite wide and varied. Like we just mentioned, you can start at as little as 2 nodes and switches for the robo use case, which is one that is, I think this platform is like primed for and perfect for. Especially with the ability to then view and manage multiple of those from Azure. I think that's, it's a match made in heaven, really. But then you can kind of go through a whole bunch of use cases and scale right up to, because you want to run super performant SQL workloads. When we've got things like just modernize and refresh hardware, upgrade Hyper-V, we've got VDI, etc. Does anybody want to grab one of those use cases or talk about a couple just to sort of give people an idea of the different things that Azure Stack HCI can help with?
Go ahead, Michael. I'm sure you have.
So the infrastructure modernization is a big one, right? So we've talked a bit about those traditional hypervisor workloads running on Hyper-V. A lot of times those are running on older 3-tier architectures, right? So there's a reason why HCI has taken off the way it has, and a big part of it is standardization, right? I can standardize on building blocks, and I can grow from fairly small. I mean, we said 2-node clusters, and I can grow up by increasing the size of clusters. I can grow out by increasing the number of clusters that I have without having to hit a point and say, oh no, this SAN can't support this workload anymore. I've got to get another SAN, or I've got to replace that with a bigger SAN, or my fiber channel network needs to be updated now because the new HBAs and there's a lot of complexity in maintaining those different tiers, and there are a number of challenges as you scale, right? With HCI, you standardize. You're doing consistent nodes. You're updating them the same way, even if you have different generations of hardware. The management of those remains the same, right? So it's a great way to standardize and simplify that infrastructure, but still support those traditional workloads. And through capabilities like AKS and Arc-enabled Kubernetes and Arc-enabled data services, to be able to support those traditional workloads, but also bring in those newer Azure services to support those newer workloads as well, right, on the same infrastructure.
And one thing to add too, just which kind of gets overlooked a lot of times, but customers struggle today on what are they going to do with their legacy infrastructures, are running maybe on Windows 2008, or God forbid, Windows 2003, which are still out there. And even Windows 2012. Like, what do we do? How do we move forward, especially when Microsoft has discontinued the update process for that? Like, the only thing they can get is through paid support to enable that future supportability of the products. One thing that you can do is use Azure Stack HCI to migrate those current legacy platforms to the HCI platform and continue to get ongoing support from Microsoft, still remaining on-prem. Traditionally, that's been either move it up to the Azure public space to run there, which requires a lift and shift up there to get it there, or you could use it traditionally on Azure Stack Hub, but they have now extended that to Azure Stack HCI as well. So it's a good way to modernize your platform.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a great point. So yeah, any customers out there, anybody listening that has these out of support workloads, yeah, just migrating them to the Azure Stack HCI platform, they are going to get continued updates, security updates for an extended period of time. I'm sorry, I've had to remain on mute for most of the time because, as we can all see, that Kizzi is here, very much here and in the screen, but she's purring really loudly. So I didn't want to stay off mute in case that's picked up. I imagine it will be a little bit. And Kizzi agrees with basically everything that we said. So we know we're good. For those just listening and not watching, Kizzi is my cat, and she has been crawling all over in front of the screen asking for cozies, as we say in Scotland. Okay, cool. So next, let's talk about, and we touched on a little bit, right, support, but let's talk about support and deployment from a Dell perspective and what you can expect. I think one of the coolest things is that you can phone Dell and you can get support for the hardware plus the operating system, which, I mean, I think again, for us to be able to do that, we must be pretty clued up and tight with Microsoft. For us to be willing to put that online and say, yep, if you have a problem, call us. Even if it's to do with the operating system, we will support you.
Yep, and a lot of times customers can't identify, is it the operating system or is it the underpinning, hardware underneath, right? So the ability to call in to Dell first and foremost, and then let us make the determination, is it at the software layer or is it at the hardware layer? And if it's at the software layer, let's support it to where we can and then engage Microsoft direct rather than saying, hey, you need to go call Microsoft, it's their problem. We definitely don't want to do that. We have the back-end system to support those direct interactions with Microsoft. We'll open up a support ticket with them direct, and they will work specifically with us directly to the customer.
Yeah, and I think that's super powerful.
Yeah, and part of that integrated system and what we're talking about with the AX nodes is not just the fact that we've architected these configurations specifically for these Microsoft solutions, but it takes a lot of the guesswork out of trying to pick from the components, right? So do I need a RAID controller or do I not need a RAID controller, or how do I want to set up the operating system drives? Or we've removed all that guesswork. You don't have to worry about, is this component on the hardware compatibility list, because we're not going to offer you a component that's not on the hardware compatibility list. We're not going to offer you a configuration that we haven't already validated is going to work. So you don't have to worry about those things. And then all of our AX nodes include our deployment services. So it's going to include that ProDeploy or ProDeploy Plus, where we're gonna handle the deployment for you. If that solution includes switches, we're gonna handle the switch configurations. We're gonna handle setting up the nodes. We're gonna handle implementing best practices so that the storage network is configured properly. The uplinks out to the rest of your network are done right. It's really taking away that learning curve, because you don't have to worry about it. We've done it. We've been doing it for years. We know how it's done right. Yeah. And so we're going to do it. And
it's predictable.
Exactly.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we touched on it a little bit earlier as well when we were talking about, and we take our supply chain and the sustainability of our products into the future like super seriously. We really do put so much effort into making sure that if you buy a system like this from us, we will be able to find those parts that make up that system for a number of years. We will be able to support you into the long term and in the future and expansion. And it's funny, I kind of assumed that would be standard for a hardware vendor to do. But I have since learned in the past couple of years that it's not, and that actually some vendors don't put that much thought into these things, which I find crazy, to be honest. But it seems that Dell take, like, again, just the part, our global supply chain and the fact that we do this for not just Azure Stack, but all our other products, and Azure Stack therefore, benefits from that, is we take those things very seriously. when we are, and then again, that comes back to the AX nodes, like we were talking before. We've taken a lot of time to make sure that we can, if a customer buys something from us now, it's not going to be a nightmare in the future when they do want to expand, for instance.
Yeah, if they want to expand or if they have a component failure, right? So we want to make sure that if you have a CPU that goes out, can you get that replaced 3-5 years down the road?
Yeah.
Well, and that's evidenced by the fact that, sorry, Mike.
No, you're fine.
That's evidenced by the fact that most of our, for the Windows Server-based solution, the most of our Skylake-based clusters can still be expanded today. And that's in a world where now that we have Cascade Lake and Cascade Lake Refresh and Ice Lake is on the doorstep, the Skylake processor supply really dwindled, but because we had pre-validated and focused on those components that we could ensure supply chain, most of those Skylake-based clusters can still be expanded today. And then when we made the switch from the S2D ready nodes to the AX nodes, we had a migration path to allow those existing S2D clusters to be carried over or upgraded essentially to AX node clusters, so that you could continue to operate and expand those clusters. Because we know customers, that hardware is not cheap. You make a hardware investment, you need to be able to live with that asset and use it for years. And so we want to ensure that you have that ability to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. It is an investment. It's quite often a pretty hefty investment.
I would say, one thing to add too is just looking at the past year with the COVID pandemic and the way it's impacted. If you look in the market right now, in the silicon space, everybody's being impacted by, shortages of components, right? We've been able to maintain our supply chain throughout the life of this whole pandemic. And thankfully it's kind of hopefully coming to an end. It's still a struggle. So, the hardware vendors out there are struggling to meet the need and the demand because there's a huge pin-up demand trying to get these components. We've been lucky. We've really not had an impact to our delivery of either new systems or expansions or repairs. And I think it's paramount about the supply chain.
Yeah.
And we've not been lucky, Mike. We have been prepared because we think about
it's
in the future. And then you're so right. Last year, I really thought that was going to be something else we were going to have to deal with, and it just wasn't. And there was other vendors out there beginning to struggle. And I think if we've seen anything, it's been only very recently. And we've still managed to overcome those. And the times, if there have been any extensions, have been so slim in comparison to the rest of the market. And you're like, that is all down to the amount of preparation and planning and importance that we put on this part, which I think just shows that we value the customers' investments that they're making with us. So yeah, I think that's very, very key part. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and summarize why Dell for Azure Stack HCI. Okay, so first up, this is a fully productized solution. We've gone down the integrated system road. This is an enterprise class system for you to run your solutions on. I think we as Dell fully get the fact that this is Azure integrated, and we want to provide a really great experience, an experience of the level that you would expect from Azure. We want to be able to empower IT teams to focus higher up the value chain, and do the things that actually, again, over the last year, IT teams are being asked to do, is now become that business partner. Because remember when everyone told you needed a DR plan and you needed to, that's proven true. And I think Michael Dell actually said at Dell Tech Worlds, I really hope it was Michael Dell and we're not about to get this wrong, but I think he said that every company is now a technology company. And that is very true. So I think we recognize that, and we recognize it's a better together, and it's a better together. Let's not use that phrase from a UK Brexit plan. Even though I voted no to Brexit, I'm just going to put that out there. I could just see the comments. Do you know what might be the first podcast that I edit something out? No, I won't. So fully productized. We get that it's Azure integrated. We've got the integrated lifecycle management, which Michael covered in really great depth. I think that, some of that stuff is so impressive. And it could be easily written off as, yeah, you've got lifecycle management in your HCI platforms. Like, of course you should, but it's like, no, we take it to the next level. So I think that's super important. And then the strength of our Microsoft and Dell partnership. I think the history, the experience that we have together, the fact that we fully invested in that backend support system and being able to switch them over. The fact that even like we as a team exist, right? Microsoft, Dell really want to make sure that we have Microsoft certified experts and expertise, and who are really close to the partnership and the products, and making sure that we're going down the right road with Microsoft. So I'm not sure that was the best sum up, but I'm gonna leave it at that. Anybody else got anything else they want to add?
I think you covered it all.
Yeah, I think we did. I think we did. I think there's many reasons, and if you want to discuss any of these reasons with us, and not in a salesy way or whatever. We could talk all day about this stuff. So if you genuinely just want to find out more, you want to learn about more detail, you want to discuss the product with us, then definitely just reach out. You can get in touch with me at Lisa at the Edge on Twitter. Michael, what's your Twitter handle?
SQL Tech Mike.
Yes. And Mike, what's yours?
M. Derrberry. That's Derrberry.
I love your second name with all the R's, especially as a Scottish person. I'm like, Derrberry.
Derrberry. Don't worry, I've had a lot of different iterations of it, so.
Just imagine. To be fair, actually, when we put this video out, they will be on the screen. So people have been able to view them the entire time we've been speaking. Well, guys, I'm so thankful that we managed to get this podcast episode recorded. I know that we've had to move it a fair few times because we've been pretty busy. But I'm super, I'm super glad that we got this done. Thank you so much for joining me. Let's not take months to get together again and have another chat. I think that there's going to be some pretty, like we say, we've got AKS on Azure Stack HCI coming GA soon, and there's going to be features and updates thick and fast coming to Azure Stack HCI. So let's definitely get back together and talk about those updates. But in the meantime, I'll see you in work later on.
Right. Thanks for having us, Lisa. It was great.
Yeah, thank you.
No worries. Thanks for joining. Bye, guys. Take care.
Bye.